I've seen some horrible footage coming out of Syria. Christians and Alawites are under attack. These minorities may have had sympathies with the previous regime, the Ba'ath party, and those that are attacking them are justifying it by saying these are the remnants of the former regime. But I've seen images of women, children being victims of these attacks. So how are they part of the previous regime? And why is it that these minorities would have had sympathy towards the previous regime? Well, you know the new flag of Syria, or it's actually the old flag. The Ba'ath flag was the red, white and black with the green stars, and now this is green, white and black with the red stars in the middle. And that's actually the flag from the French Mandate during the colonial times. And this is during Sykes-Picot, when Britain took charge of Palestine and Transjordan, as it was known then, and the French took control of Syria and Lebanon. And during that time, the French control over Syria, they actually had like an Alawite semi-autonomous region. I think that was almost going to be an Alawite country. The Alawites being this Shia sect of Islam that elevate Ali to a very high status. And this religious group were militarized during the French mandate of Lebanon and Syria. They were mostly rural agricultural farmers, and due to the tax that was put upon them, they ended up seeking work in the military, and the French were quite keen to get the Alawites into the military. So when a military coup happened and the Ba'ath Party took control of Syria years later, it was the Alawites who dominated the army, and that's how Hafiz al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, ended up in control of the country when the Ba'ath Party took power, and from him, his son took control later on. So wherever the imperial powers have gone, they've always used minorities, propped up minorities to dominate over a majority country. So it wound up that Alawites, a minority sect, maybe 10% or so of the country, dominated the army and had a dominant or privileged position in Syria under Ba'athist rule. And I met Alawite people when I was in Syria. I got chatting to a few, and one particular Alawite taxi driver, when I mentioned in my broken Arabic the good thing about Syria is that it's so diverse and there's many different sects, and I mentioned the Alawiyin, and he said, "Oh yes, that's me. I'm Alawite." He was proud to mention it. And then when we went through a checkpoint and spoke to the army, I noticed that he was on very good terms with the army, with the officers that were waving us through, and we had a little bit of a laugh and a joke together. So certainly this section of society may have had a perceived privileged position under the Assad regime. Is that any justification to do what we've seen on video? But very often it is the privileged section of society that bears the brunt of a backlash when there's a vacuum of power. I often mention it in Rwanda, when the Tutsis were massacred by the Hutus. it had been the Tutsis that enjoyed the privileged position, that were seen as the superior tribe by the Belgians that occupied that part of Africa. So very often it's the colonial powers, the European colonial powers, that have stirred these seeds of hatred that boil over years later. True in Africa, true in the Middle East. And I mentioned that there would have been an Alawite section of Syria. Lebanon could have been part of Syria. When the French and the British carved it up, Lebanon was intended to be a majority Christian country, and it was majority Christian in the beginning. But the demographics changed, and immigration, influx of refugees toppled that balance. But because of the way that Lebanon was set up, Christians still hold a certain amount of power, perhaps disproportionate to their numbers now, and there will always be, due to the factionalism, there has to be a Christian prime minister, a Sunni president, and I think a Shia speaker of the House in the government in Lebanon. Forgive me if I've divided that up incorrectly, but there is a proportional representation of power to these sects in Lebanon based on the demographics of when the country was created over half a decade ago. And as I say, Lebanon should and could perhaps been part of Syria. And during this backlash to imperialism and the independence of countries like Syria and Lebanon, it were the Arab nationalism that the Ba'ath Party is a part of was created by thinkers such as Michel Aflaq, the great Arab nationalist who was of a Christian background. And you'll find that a lot of the names behind this Arab nationalism would have been from Christian background or other minorities, perhaps because they were afraid of Islamism and political Islam, and the way that political Islam had functioned in the region had led people to become Arab nationalist. It was the Ottoman Turks that ruled over that part of the Middle East, and it was actually the British that convinced the Arabs through Lawrence of Arabia to rise up against these Turkish foreign rulers that were mistreating them, and convinced them to be proud that they were Arabs. And for that reason, you would find a lot of Christian identity and Christian presence amongst the Arab nationalists. The Ba'ath Party, which split in two, took control of Syria. It also took control of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was a Ba'athist, and one of his closest aides was Tariq Aziz, an Iraqi Christian of an Assyrian background. And if you go back far enough, the Assyrian heritage, the Assyrian culture, would have been perhaps the dominant and original culture and heritage of these regions. And over the years, Arabic language became the dominant language, the lingua franca in the region. But of course, Syrians, Iraqis, Jordanians, they are not fully Arabs by blood. They are Arabs by culture and by language. They're people that have been Arabized as their ancestors adopted the Arabic language. So this idea of a pan-Arab nationalism popular among Christians, like Michel Aflaq, was perhaps a way of blending in, becoming part of a majority. If you're part of a Christian religious minority in the Middle East, perhaps you'd rather focus on the fact that, well, hey, we're all Arabs, we all speak Arabic, rather than focusing on the differences between us. And yes, Michel Aflaq, a great Arab nationalist and a Christian. It is said that he converted to Islam later in life and was buried in a Muslim graveyard. Whether that's true or not, some people speculate. Perhaps Saddam Hussein and the like just wanted a happy ending to the story, that he became a Muslim, but he was certainly of a Christian background originally. So, where do these Christians in Syria turn to? And Alawites who are suffering so horribly now on these videos that we're watching, and who caused all this? Who wanted this to happen? Who was arming and funding and training the radical extremists that took over Syria? You watch the videos, and many of them are Chechen, Uyghurs from China, a whole bunch of different languages being spoken by these HTS fighters that have taken charge of the country. And of course, Jilani, who is originally Syria, from the Golan, the Israeli-occupied Golan. He is originally a Syrian, and he has taken off his Islamic clothing and is now wearing a suit. But who funded these groups? Who opened the border? I'm looking at Erdogan in Turkey, who flooded the country. Who patched them back up and put them back out to the battlefield when they were injured in the Golan Heights, which is occupied by the country next door? I'll let you work that one out. But it's a horrendous sight to see what's happening in Syria now, and I hope people will come out to show support for these Christian and Alawite people that are suffering, and let's not descend into sectarianism. I guess that's it for the Ba'ath Party. Arab nationalism has come and gone, hasn't it? At one point it was useful. It was propped up by the Western powers. As I mentioned, Lawrence of Arabia was telling the Arabs how Arab they were. And then when that was no longer useful, the Western powers started propping up the Islamists and encouraging them to go and topple these secular Arab nationalist regimes. And I think that the Ba'ath Party in Syria was probably the last time we'll see an Arab nationalist government for a while. Is there another one that I can't think of? There's no more Ba'ath Party in Iraq. There's no more Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt. Where is the Arab nationalism? And is that the answer for these Christians and these Alawites? How are we going to get the Middle East to unite? Under what banner can all the people of the Middle East unite under? Let me know what you think.